Hi class, I wanted to go over how to set up 3dsMax and get it ready for production. One of the things I run into all the time is students have a tendency to just kind of not set Max up correctly. As a matter of fact, they don't set it up at all. They just open up Max and they start creating things and they throw textures in here and then everything is helter-skelter. You want to keep your thing organized. You know, you're going into a field where you're going to be working together as groups, and so we want everything organized. And the way you can think of this class is you're working together with me as a group. So you're going to be sharing your files with me so I can help troubleshoot your files. So you want to set up Max correctly right off the bat. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is to set up a folder structure. So I've got a folder here, set up for Max. Okay, I'm going to set a project for each week. So week 1, assignment 2. So that's where we're going to set our project up. And so in Max, what you do is right up here, there's a little button right up here, which is to be able to set up your project folder right here. So you click on that and then you find your way through your hard drives, wherever, to your folder. Here's mine right here. And you click on that and then you click OK. Now, what it's going to do is set up a set of folders for us. Okay. And so what that's done is we look in this folder now, it's put us a whole list of folders in here. Okay, so now Max knows this is we're going to be saving all our files, and like our scenes will go in our scenes folder. Our texture files go inside a scene assets, images folder. That's where you put your texture files inside of there. Max will automatically put its auto backup files in the auto backup folder. And so this is a way to keep everything organized so that when you are sharing your files, everything is set up in the same way and everybody's, setting their stuff up exactly the same. And so this is what you should be doing. First thing, you open up Max, you set the project folder, and then you put everything that you're going to be using in the correct folders. Okay. So, we have some things that we're going to be doing this first project. So I'm going to go in my scenes folder. And then what I'm going to do is to put in, Max's. Okay. So I'm dragging in to our scenes folder, the, Max file that I'd sent you, okay? And so we're going to put it inside of there, and then in our scene assets images folder, that's where we're going to put that texture, checker texture that I sent you, okay? So everything is set up correctly, so we always put our scene assets images, that's where all our texture files go, and then your scenes is where your Max file will go, okay? So now when I come in here and I go File, Open, it will automatically take me into that folder because it knows that's where I'm going to be organizing all of my scenes. So it automatically takes me in there, and then I can open up my scene. Okay. Okay. So there's our scene. And now we want to set Max up. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and bring this scene up full scale so we can look at it. Now, under rendering, we're going to go up here to render setup, and we're going to turn on Mental Ray. Now, Mental Ray is a productions renderer, and by default, when you come in, yours will say default scanline render right here. And what you want to do is change it to NVIDIA Mental Ray. Mental Ray is a physical base renderer that's referred to as PBR, and that just means that our surfaces will react to light like real surfaces would in reality. Okay. Now, another thing is as you come in here, your output size, a lot of times defaults to 640 by 480. We're using HDTV, which is down here at the bottom. And then we want to be rendering 1280 by 720. Okay. Another thing you want to make sure is that your, your measurement system. So if you go up here to customize, unit setup, you want to make sure that your unit setup by default, when you come into Max, it's set up to generic units, which means we don't really know what that measurement is. So I'm going to go up here to US standard, and I'm going to use feet with decimal inches because I'm in the United States, and I don't want to use fractions because I don't want to have to say quarter of an inch. I want to use decimals. So I'm switching to that. And then this is nothing other than the measurement system. It's all it changes the measurement. It doesn't change the scale of the room. Now up here where this says system unit setup, this actually changes the scale of the room. Now, default is 1 unit is an inch, which is fine because we're doing a tabletop thing. But if we were doing a big environment, we might want to change this to feet. Okay. Now, this has to do with the scale of the lights and how they react in our scene. Okay. All right. So let's see what else we want to set up. Okay, under rendering, you want to go down here and check this gamma LUT setup and make sure this is checked. A lot of times when you install Max, this is off. We want to check this is our gamma correction and want to make sure that our gamma correction is on. So make sure that's checked on. Okay, and now you've pretty much got Max set up correctly. You've got your folder structure set up correctly, and that way when we save things or we want to import materials, then you're ready to go. Okay, so we're going to go into our material editor, which is this button right here, or M on the keyboard, and I'd already set up some shaders in here. So there's already a shader here, here, and here, okay, to initially set these up, but we want to change these, okay? So I'm just going to delete these, and what we want to do is go over here to mental ray, and we want to use an arch and design shader. We want to go with a advanced shader. This is a physical based shader. Okay, so let's just go ahead and name this one sphere, and we'll put this one on the sphere. Now by default, if you click on the little icon right here, you'll be able to see it a little bit better. Now to get to its attributes over here, you double click on this green area, and then its attributes will pop up in this window over here. So by default, the arch and design, which is the same as a Mia shader in Maya, it's set up for like porcelain or something very glossy like granite. And we want to turn this down for our object. So we're going to come in here and turn our reflectivity, which is how much it's going to reflect things around it, to 0.2. And then our glossiness, which is how shiny it is, down to 0.4. So we don't want something too overly shiny. Okay. All right. Now that we have this set up, what we're going to do is drop in the diffuse, we're going to drop a bitmap. Okay, so if you click this little this dot right here and you drag to the background and then let up on your mouse, some little flyouts will come out. Now, we want to go to standard. Okay, now these are all maps, different maps I can plug in, and I want to plug in a bitmap. So I go to that, and then a window's going to open, and looky there, it automatically took me to my actual images, because it knows that's where the textures are supposed to be. So you don't have to search folders and everything, because everything's organized correctly. Click on that, and that will bring that in. Okay. Now we want to name things. So I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to call this checker map. When you get in the habit of naming things, okay. And then we want to apply this to our object. So I'm just going to pick my object. Okay. Now there's a couple of ways that you can do this. Okay. You can actually, these are the inputs. So this is your inputs over here, and this is your outputs. So you can drag it and drop it like that. Okay. Or you can just, on this area right up here, you can right click and assign it to whatever selected. Either way. Okay. So that's on there. Now you'll see that the material doesn't show up on there. So in Max, what you have to do is there's a button right here. Kind of think of this right up at the top of this little scroll over here. There's a button that's show material in viewport. When you click on that, it's going to show the material on here. Now notice we can't see anything, and that's because this is a bitmap and it needs mapping coordinates, and we haven't put correct mapping. We haven't got any mapping coordinates on it. So we have to put them on there. Okay. Now by default, a sphere does have mapping coordinates. I kind of cheated. I deleted all these coordinates off of these so that you'd have to go back and put them back on. Okay. So I'm going to minimize this. So Max has a modifier stack. It's a little bit different from Maya. It's got a modifier stack, allows you to load things up, kind of like layers in Photoshop. And so right here, modifier list, I pull down, and a lot of people you'll see online are using unwrap UVW. We'll use that later, but for something like these primitives, we don't need that. We're just going to go into a UVW map, and you'll see as soon as I put it on there that I can see my material on there, but you'll see it's not correct. Okay, that's because by default this UVW map uses planar. Okay, and we have different ones that we can use in here. We want spherical, and when I go spherical, look, there it is. Okay, now it's stretched a little bit, so we're going to want to fix that. And what we're going to do is on our checker right here, you have a U and a V measurement. So see where this says tiling? You have a U tiling and a V tiling. U is left and right, V is up and down. So let's try like a 2. Okay, and so now that material these seem more like squares. That's what we're trying to shoot for. We're trying to shoot that these look like squares. So a 2, that looks pretty good. Okay. So I'm going to go for that. Okay. So that looks pretty good. All right. So now we need to make a material for this one. Okay. So now, by the way, I'm hitting F4 to turn my wireframe on and off. Now, by default, that is off on Max. What I do is right here where this says realistic right here, or it could be shaded, you want to pull down to where this says display selected, and you want to uncheck this one right here. You do not want display selected with edge faces, or I don't like that. What that means is that when I pick something, it's going to put the wireframe on it, okay? But there are times where I want to pick things and I don't want the wireframe on it, okay? So I turn that off. That way my F4 turns my wireframe on and off, okay? So I can kind of control that. All right, so we're going to pick our cube here, our box, and we can apply this to it, okay? Now, it doesn't have mapping coordinates, and so I'm going to go put mapping coordinates on it. So we'll go down here and a UVW map. Same thing, you'll see it's stretched, okay? That's because it needs a box map. Now, you'll see it's box mapped, and now this is all stretched. And the reason this is stretched is because I changed it over here, and I'm using the same material on these, okay? We really want to isolate our material, so we really don't want the same material on there. So what I'm going to do is select both of these. Now, in Max, when you move objects or rotate objects or scale objects and you hold the Shift key down, it will duplicate it. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key while I'm in here and drag this over, and it will make a copy, okay? So now I'm going to double click on this one, and I'm going to call this one cube or box, okay? And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to apply it to that one. And now I'm going to go back to this checker where I had changed the tiling and change it back to its default, which is 1. Oops, I changed the wrong one. Change the sphere one. I want to change this one. And then make sure I have applied this cube to it. Okay. Now you'll see it disappear on us there, and that's because I need to come back to this and click this button to show that one in the viewport. And now you'll see that the material is on both of these, but you'll kind of see that the size of these are different. Okay. Now there's a couple of ways that you can fix this. Okay. You can go back in here to your tiling in here, and I could come in and say, okay, change the tiling to maybe 0.5 and 0.5 in here to get them bigger. Okay. That's one way to do it. Okay. And another way you can do it, which is kind of unique to Max, is I can come in here under our UVW map right here, and I can grab the Gizmo. Okay. That is the coordinate itself. And if I right click to scale, and you want to make sure you click in the center right here, not on this edge. This only scales in one direction, but right in the center, then I can interactively adjust this by just clicking and holding down. And if we're trying to get these about the same size, we're going to go with something about like that, the same size. Then I could actually move the coordinate. Now, what you're going to want up here, we don't want to move the coordinate on the view. We want to use it on the local axis, which means the axis of the object. And then I can kind of slide this over so that what I'm really trying to get is that 1 to be right in that corner, okay? And so now this coordinate, it looks pretty good. These are about approximately the same size. They don't have to be perfectly the same size, but we want them to be approximately the same size. And what that's doing is controlling it so that once I start painting bitmaps to apply on these, that the size of the pixels on this and the size of the pixels on that would be the same. It's called pixel density. Okay, that looks pretty good. So let's go in and do this again. So we'll go ahead and take this one. We're going to copy this one over by holding my Shift key. Okay, and we're going to call this one cylinder. And we're going to apply that to our cylinder. Okay, that'll apply that on there. And of course, we don't see anything on there because we don't have a coordinate on. So we're going to come in here and we're going to add a UVW map on that one too. And we don't see our material because I forgot to turn it on. Right here, double click this button. You can see it in our viewport. And now you'll see the same thing. It's planar. So we've got a problem in here. So we're going to go in here and say cylindrical. And now you've got the issues in here that it's going on right, but it's not tiling correctly. Okay. So we can go back to our material editor here and we can see on the U is not quite what we want. So let's go in here and maybe type 3 on the U. And now they're getting to be squares. Okay. But they're not quite the right size. Okay. So the same thing goes in here. If I go to Gizmo right here, right click to scale, click on the inside, then I can scale this up. Okay. But you kind of have to watch it because you can see that it's scaling one direction different than the other. Okay. Okay. I'm going to get my height right about right. Now I can scale it on this one. Now, another way that this can be done, okay, so we'll go back, is here. You have tiling in here, okay? So we have ways that we can tile it in here. Okay, so let's get the width about right for these other squares over here. So we get the width about right. Let's go something right about there. And then on the V, we'll scale these up. And looks like this needs to come down a little bit. Okay, we're trying to get squares and about the same size. And so there we go. And that all looks pretty good. The problem you have, the cylinder has a cap on it. Okay. So on our cylinder, you'll see right here is a cap button. You have to turn that on and then it puts planar mapping from the top so that it's planar mapping from the top and cylindrical mapping on the side. Okay. So if we were to come in here and look at this from the top, okay, the problem you're going to get into is because we use this tiling to adjust that, it's doing that on the top as well. So if we change this back, these all one, then that fixes the top, but it changes the size. Okay. So there's a little trick that you can do. Okay. So what we're going to do is go ahead and not use the cap here because so this is all correct. And now what I'm going to do is to come back down to my edit poly and I can actually pick this top cap and put a separate material on it. So I'm going to pick it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is to come over here to our cylinder. Okay. And I'm going to make a separate material. Okay. So we're going to name this one cylinder edges. And then we're going to copy this. Okay. As a matter of fact, I don't have to change this. I just copy this one and this will be plugged into both of them, which is correct. And then this one's going to be cylinder top. And I can apply that and it'll apply it just to the top. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and hold down our shift and copy this map node and plug in here. Now, the reason I want to do that is because we're going to put separate mapping coordinates in it. And in Max, the coordinates are based on a numbering system. So when I select on this one, which is on the edge, you'll see it's a number 1 on its map channel. So right here on this one, which I want to be on the top, I'm going to change this to 2, which means it's going to read a different mapping coordinate. Okay. So I can turn this off now and I go back in and you'll see this is my cylindrical and you see it says 1. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the top view. Okay. To look at this object and I'm going to put a new coordinate on it. I'm going to stack them. You can stack these like in Photoshop and I'm going to stack these and I'm going to tell this one to be on 2. Okay. So it's coordinate 2. So it's like layers in Photoshop. I'm going to turn this one on so I can see it. And I want to see it on my Arch and Design. And now you'll see I've got the coordinate on there. So now I'm using this one to control the coordinate on the edge and this one to control the coordinate on the top. Okay, and then I can switch back to our camera view, and now that's all set up. Then the last thing we want to do is put a shader on our ground plane. Okay, so let's pull out another arch in design. This is going to be our ground. And then we'll apply that to it. And then we don't want this all reflective and glossy, so we're just going to turn our reflectivity to 0, our glossiness to 0, so it's a nice gray shader, but it's not going to be a reflection. And then we're ready to render, and I'm going to pause this while I render this. Okay, so there it is after the rendering. And so we've got our sphere here, our cube here, and our cylinder. Now, one of the things I notice is this is about the right size, that's about the right size, but I notice that this cap on here is too small. So I'm going to want to scale that up. So I'm going to go in here to this UVW Gizmo. Now, one of the things I do is I rename these. You can rename these. And so I'm going to right click on this one. I'm going to leave the UVW, but I'm going to call this cylinder and 1 so that I know that's cylindrical mapping on the 1 channel. So I don't get confused on these. I'm going to rename this one, and this is cap 2. So I know that's the cap. So now I'm going to click on the gizmo right here. I'm going to right click to scale, and then I'm going to go down here and hit this lock button right down here. That means I don't have to click on the icon. I can just click anywhere in the background, and I can start scaling until I can see that those are getting about the right size. Then I can move it left and right. I'm going to put that purple on there so that kind of lines up, and you'll see it's still a little bit small. So I'm going to go back to my scale. Still a hair small. There are other ways to scale it too, but that looks pretty good. So now that's pretty much lining up. I'm going to move it on my y-axis back a little bit. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to re-render that. Now, what I can do is a region render. Both in Maya and Max, you have a region render. So instead of having to render this whole thing again, I can go up here and click this little button right here, and I can draw a box around the area I want to re-render. That way it speeds up my workflow. I don't have to re-render everything. Just right there, hit my render button. That's going to re-render the top. Now you'll see our scale is much better. I'm going to go up here to region and turn this off. And now there you go. That looks pretty good. The sizes are all exact. They're not exactly the same. They don't have to be exact. They just got to be close. Okay. And so there's my mapping coordinates. Nice render. I'm leaving the rendering on low quality for this, so, which means it'll be a little grainy in your shadow, which is fine for what we're doing here. And then you just click your little floppy here, right up here, and you can save this image, and then you post it up, and then there you go. Okay, so that pretty much covers the whole thing that I wanted to cover. So you're able to understand that, let's see, I'll go back and pull up our folder again. So there's our Max folder, week 1. There's all of our views. And by the way, when I do my save file, and let's call this render, okay, and we'll just save this as a garbage file, a JPEG file, and then we want to go up your two stages, your render output. That's where you're going to put your renders, okay, and then we'll save it in there. And so we put our renders and our render output, and then there's your file that you could post up, okay? All right, so hopefully this covered everything and answered a lot of questions that you guys have. And if you have any more questions, just post them up on the forum. Okay, thank you very much.